Today, Donald Trump made his first visit to Capitol Hill since he was president, his first time on the Hill since his followers ransacked the Capitol on January 6th. But to understand why Trump chose to come back now, after more than 3 years away, you don't have to look as far back as the insurrection. You just have to remember what Trump has been asking Congress to do since his criminal conviction 2 weeks ago. The day after Trump was convicted of 34 felony counts in his New York hush money case, 8 Republican senators vowed to oppose all Biden nominees and all Democratic legislation as retribution. Today, 6 Republican senators, led by Trump vice presidential shortlister J.D. Vance, put the oppose all Biden nominees part of that vow into writing. Senators explained that they would block nominees, including anyone who has suggested the Trump prosecutions were reasonable, anyone who endorsed Trump's guilt, anyone who supported organizations that celebrated the indictment of Donald Trump, and anyone who supported Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg or supported lawfare or censorship in other ways, which is just vague enough to include basically anyone President Biden has nominated. Now, these Republican senators say that their blockade will last until Election Day. And in practical terms, that means the U.S. government will not be able to appoint representatives to things like the UN General Assembly or the World Health Organization, or even to the not particularly political seeming places like the International Civil Aviation Organization and the Public Buildings Reform Board. What exactly did any of those organizations have to do with prosecuting Donald Trump? Nothing. This isn't about policy. It is about retribution. You might remember that last year, Senator Tommy Tuberville pulled a similar sort of stunt. Tuberville became the first U.S. senator in history to do a long-term blockade of U.S. military appointments. Senator Tuberville kept more than 400 qualified U.S. service members, 400, from being appointed or promoted for 10 months. All because of a Department of Defense abortion policy that had nothing to do with those service members. The blockade was such a blatant misuse of power, it wasn't just Democrats who were appalled by this. Here were some of Tuberville's fellow Republican senators on month 9 of his stunt.
No matter where you believe it or not, Senator Tuberville, this is doing great damage to our military.
This power is extraordinary that we're given as individual senators, but it's incumbent upon us to use it in a reasonable way.
Everybody uses holds. I certainly use holds. But the key is you put a hold on someone who typically has some kind of control over the issue that you're trying to fix.
There's not one senator in here that could not find a reason to object to an administration policy in the military. None of us. We could all find something. I just hope we don't do this routinely.
I just hope we don't do this routinely. Does 2 times count as a routine? Because if so, this makes it a routine. And this time it isn't even about a policy disagreement, however tangential. It's just so Republicans can protest Donald Trump being found guilty by a jury of his peers. Today, we also saw 29 Republican senators sign on to this letter, disparaging the rule of law and saying that Trump's conviction was nothing short of the evisceration of the American judicial process. So it is safe to say that from now until November, the U.S. Senate is effectively going to be at a standstill and unable to govern, not because of policy disagreements, but so Republicans can perform an act of retribution on Donald Trump's behalf. As for the House, where Republicans actually hold the majority, well, things are looking even worse. Politico is out with new reporting today saying that in the days after Trump's conviction, Trump made an F-bomb-filled call to Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. Trump's message to Johnson: we have to overturn this. And now, a few weeks after that call, it looks like Speaker Johnson's mission is not just to grind the government to a halt like his Republican colleagues in the Senate. It is to actually use the power of the government to try and make Trump's criminal concerns go away. By way of an example, yesterday, House Republican leaders spent the day whipping votes for a bill that would allow presidents charged at the state level to move those cases to federal court. Let me just check my notes here. How many presidents have been criminally charged at the state level again? Oh, only one. What an interesting use of congressional power. Politico also reports that Speaker Johnson is in talks with House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan about using the appropriations process to target special counsel Jack Smith and to defund his investigation. Now, neither of those have the votes to pass yet. But that is the kind of stuff that Republicans in Congress are working on right now, which really helps put into context why Donald Trump went back to Capitol Hill today. It wasn't for any legitimate legislative concern. It was for what Republican Congressman Matt Gaetz called a pep rally for President Trump. A pep rally complete with an early birthday party for Donald Trump himself. Are you surprised that the pledges of allegiance, as they are so explicit, so undisguised on Capitol Hill?
I'm not surprised by it, right? I mean, this is something we've seen for years now. I mean, watching that package, the thing that struck me is the Republicans are a little bit like parents on an airplane with a crying child, right? Mm-hmm. They have this source of noise and frustration, and everyone's sick of it, and there's nothing they can do with it. They're stuck on this plane. They got to figure out how to calm this kid down. And the kid here, of course, is Donald Trump, and he's mad about having been convicted, and he's mad about the fact that he's not in power currently. And so, Mike Johnson, oh, don't worry, I'll talk to the Supreme Court. Like, they are doing everything in their power to keep him happy, to keep him quiet, to keep him on their side, and most importantly, to keep him from lashing out at them, right? And so that's what you see. That's what you see with this demonstration with the House. That's what you see with this demonstration with the Senate. They're all trying to keep him happy, keep him quiet, and just get through this until November. Yeah,
it is like parenthood. They're terrified of him and they adore him. He's the center of their universe, and they can't control him at all, and they must cater to his every whim. I do wonder, though, Dahlia, as you see the machinations of the House Republican Conference and the Republicans in the Senate, just openly trying to undermine the rule of law, does it not just throw out the notion of the justice system in America as we watch the legislative branch do this work?
Yeah, I think that's a feature, not a bug, right? I mean, I think that we are seeing a systematized attack on the rule of law. I think even if we hadn't had the conviction in the New York trial, we've seen a longstanding set of attacks on judges, on juries, on, prosecutors, on witnesses. I mean, I think the whole zeitgeist here is, and it's not a surprise, this is a kind of classic authoritarian play, is just foment doubt in institutions. And if you foment enough doubt in institutions, people start to look really longingly at the strong man who's going to save them when institutions crumble. So no part of this is new or unfamiliar. I think what's interesting is seeing a lot of Republicans who might have at one point, felt hinky about Donald Trump, but stood fast on the principle that judges and juries and statutes and the Constitution actually have force and meaning. The degree to which they have abandoned that and see no value in that, I think, is the part that is new and chilling.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, Philip, the idea that they're going to withhold these nominations and confirmations across the government, right? The Tuberville blockade wasn't great politics for the GOP, and yet they survived it, and they're replicating it on a different level. It's not the U.S. military, and certainly the WHO and the UN are not favorites of this Republican Party. But nonetheless, they're stymieing the basic work of governance, and they think it's good politics for them.
Yeah, I mean, I think they do think it's good politics from the standpoint that the Republican Party's political focus at this point is retribution against Joe Biden and, putting a middle finger up in the face of the elites, right? That's what they're focused on. I mean, that's not, Mitch McConnell doesn't wake up in the morning and say that's what he wants to do, but he understands that that's what the base is doing. And again, we should remember, it's not only Tommy Tuberville, it's Mitch McConnell back in 2016, holding open a Supreme Court seat. So we have also seen this pattern in the past from the Republican Party, and it is very anti-institutional, but it is fundamentally about sending a message to the American public that D.C. doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and we need to get Trump in there to bring these cads to heel.
To make us do our work again.
Right. But, and that is the singular focus, at least from now until Election Day.
I do think, Republicans are betting that their electorate won't punish them for this, and that the broader American electorate, Dahlia, isn't tuned into this, that this is part of the swamp, this is part of the dysfunction of the Capitol. And you make a really important point in one of your pieces for Slate this week about our normalcy bias, right? Americans have a normalcy bias. It leads them to believe anyone who tells them that everything is awesome and that a system is holding, it leads them to believe anyone who tells them that everything is awesome and that a system is holding, even as that system is hanging together by way of dental floss. You're talking about the system of justice here, but I think it's extended even to our dysfunctional government. People, because it still exists, because there's still a Congress that occasionally passes laws, people can sort of deride dysfunctionality, but they don't think that the U.S. democracy is in danger of actually falling apart in the same way that they hold up Trump's criminal conviction as an example that, oh, our justice system still does work. Jury by peers found him guilty. It all works. Things aren't normal right now, Dahlia. Things are very, very abnormal. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about your level of panic in this moment.
I try not to use the word panic because it makes my parents super scared, Alex, but I guess I would just say, think about where we were in 2016, what was deemed disqualifying in that race, and think about the fact that in the intervening time, we have civil juries finding Trump guilty of being a sexual abuser. We have these 34 felony convictions. We have January 6th. We have Donald Trump, who ran in 2016. We forget in the fog of memory, but as a family man, as a businessman who was going to, drain the swamp. Now he's just running as a straight up autocrat. He's running under the banner of violence, of suppression of rights, of suppression of speech, of deporting immigrants. I mean, this is really scary what's happened. And it seems as though people are almost less dialed up now than they were in 2016, where they're like, that Access Hollywood tape sounds pretty bad. Now, every single day you get this drumbeat of what I think is really distressing, saying sort of the quiet parts loud about wanting to create a sort of authoritarian state. And I think that we've just normalized it because we just super have to get to CVS to fill our prescriptions, and we're raising our kids and we're tired. And so I think this normalcy bias allows us to just wait until some adult says, like, break the glass. I don't know when break the glass happens, Alex, but I think that what we have metabolized as normal is deeply frightening.
Well, and Philip, you write about the way in which Republicans were very pre-incensed about the Trump conviction. Democrats were not pre-incensed about Hunter Biden's conviction. And as a result, Republicans are up in arms about Trump's conviction, and Democrats are largely accepting of the Hunter Biden conviction. Right. I find a number that is particularly staggering around all of this is the number of people who acknowledge that the Donald Trump conviction was the right call. It's not moving them at all in their support for Trump, right? This is new Monmouth polling out today. Do you agree or disagree with the jury's verdict finding Trump guilty? 47% agree, 34% disagree. And then you look at the numbers of people who are definitely or probably supporting each candidate. Biden 43, Trump 44. The numbers are not moving, even in the face of people saying this conviction was the right thing. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me two things. So the first thing it tells me is that we should have expected this from the standpoint that even before the verdict, something like a fifth of Trump supporters said they already thought he'd committed a crime. They were already sold. Yeah, we know he committed a crime. We're going to vote for him anyway. The second thing is that Donald Trump did a very effective job of inoculating his base against this. And it's not just, when the indictment came down early last year. It was in 2016. As soon as the Russia investigation came to the public consciousness, he started saying it's a witch hunt, it's a hoax, it's the deep state out to get me, and that patter has continued and continued and continued, and it really helped his base. Once they were bought in on that, right, in December 2016, they were bought in, and that was it, right? And so, yeah, this indictment, they look at it in the conviction, they look at it and like, that's exactly what he said. This is, at some point, rational people step back and are like, well, it's hard to believe the deep state came up with all these different crimes that Donald Trump allegedly did.
They've been busy.
Right. But they don't think about that. They just are like, yeah, they're just all out to get him, go Trump.